Welcome, Benzinga Nation. You know we love to talk to executives from publicly traded companies, and today it's a special treat because this executive, we've talked to multiple times, but he's out in South Africa doing big things and hoping to bring them to the U.S. here as well. It's my pleasure to talk to Stefano Marani, who is a CEO of Renergen. Ticker on the JSE is REN, and All Access starts right now. Steph, welcome back to the show. It's the third time we're talking.
Zunaid, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting updates on things that we've talked about. But for the folks that might just be hearing from you for the first time, give us a quick, brief overview of what is it that your company does.
So to put into context, we are the first and only onshore petroleum production right holder in South Africa. So that would be the same as saying in the United States that you're the first one that has a license to drill for natural gas and extract it, which puts us in a very favorable position. But what we produce two primary products. The first is LNG, and then the second is liquid helium. Now, liquid helium is quite an in short supply commodity, fetching an incredibly high price relative to LNG. And so overall, we find ourselves in a very favorable space with some significant tailwinds behind us, both from a South African energy crisis perspective, meaning that we can sell the LNG at a much better price, but as well as being the newest producer of liquid helium. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do.
You know, they say that being first to market gives people a big advantage, but not only are you first to market, you're the only one in the market. And I'll talk about the advantages that gives you here momentarily. But let's talk about helium, because the only way that I know that it's used is on a hot air balloon if I want to go on date night. But outside of that, what is the big deal when it comes to helium, and how critical it is in the modern world that we currently live in?
Listen, aside from also making your voice squeaky, it's a pretty critical element that doesn't really get the attention that it deserves. So to begin with, this call wouldn't be taking place without helium. And the reason for that is semiconductors. You cannot manufacture a modern semiconductor without helium. Point in case, shortly after COVID, there was the second-hand car market debacle where second-hand car prices went up because new cars just didn't have the functionality. That was because of the semiconductors, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, it was a helium supply chain issue. And the world has now been through 4 major helium crises in terms of supply. There's also the CHIPS Act, which has become quite a favorable tailwind for us, as well as the fact that the AI revolution is heavily dependent on helium for its existence. Moving away from tech, rocket launches can't take place without helium. So no satellites, no rocket launches, absolutely nothing goes into space without helium. It is critical. Specialist welding, MRIs, you can't make an MRI machine and you can't run an MRI machine without helium. Particle accelerators, so discovering the Higgs boson, that didn't get done without helium. And there's all of these other little things like underwater breathing, blah, blah, blah. The list is endless, and they're constantly finding new uses for helium. But increasingly, you're going to start to see it being used a lot more for cooling, because we've all seen and we've heard now firsthand that the new chips for AI, you produce an inordinately large amount of heat, significantly more than normal chips, and helium dissipates heat 20 times faster than air does. So there's significant energy efficiencies to be gained by using helium as the medium for cooling as opposed to normal air. So there's quite a bit that this little gas does.
I now have about 15 fun facts to talk about on my hot air balloon helium date about helium while we're up there. So I thank you for that. We mentioned about how you're not just the first, but the only onshore petroleum production. You've got the license from the South African government. What kind of advantage does that give you?
So first and foremost, having a first mover advantage means that we've done the hard yards. We've proven the reserve. We have the licenses. We've built the first plant. We're starting to sell, and we're deriving revenue from the LNG. And now I'm really proud to say we're deriving revenue from the helium as well. And it's several years before any of the other fields in South Africa come online. But South Africa right now is in the midst of a massive energy crisis. And point in case, when the government comes to its regional planning with regards to how it's going to address the energy crisis, we form part of those discussions and that planning. And that is an immensely powerful situation to be in.
Yeah. That makes sense in terms of the advantage, and especially having the backing of the government. We've seen companies that excel here in the US that have done well because they've been having policies and some, permissions from the government here in the US. So I can understand that aspect of it. Let's talk about the Virginia Gas Project, because you announced that your phase one facility at the Virginia Gas Project has just come online after a successful testing. What is such a significant about this milestone that you've achieved?
So the first phase, just to put in context, was a proof of concept. It was a pilot plant that was funded by the United States government on the basis that helium is a critical element. So we built the first plant, and we were delayed. We have to acknowledge that we're about a year behind schedule on turning on the helium. But where we've gotten to now is that we've now finally managed to get the helium module on. We're producing liquid helium. We're putting it in our customers' tanks. And that is the proof of concept now essentially closed. And that brings us in as the catalyst into the second phase. The second phase, we've already got all of the debt funding locked up, again from the US government. Through the DFC, a $500 million loan has been approved. In addition, there's another $250 million coming from a local bank in South Africa called Standard Bank, who've also approved funding. So we've got $750 million ready and waiting. And this is the catalyst that now sees us moving on to preparing for the capital raise for phase two, which we're planning on an IPO later this year on the Nasdaq in order to raise the necessary funds as the equity contribution for phase two. So this is a very special milestone. It's also a milestone which technologically makes us one of only a handful of liquid helium plants in the world, and now South Africa is one of only 8 countries on the planet that can produce liquid helium, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is again, goes back to the advantage that you have being just one of 8 to be able to do that in the world. So phase one facility, proof of concept proven, you've got the funding, starting the money coming in as well. Any more insights on terms of what's next for the project phase two entails? You kind of mentioned how the funding and everything else comes in, but is there anything else that the viewers need to know about in terms of phase two?
Listen, phase two is a remarkably different plant. Phase one, as I said, I keep reiterating it, it's a proof of concept and it's a pilot plant. Phase two is where the real game is. So phase two is call it a 700 metric ton LNG plant per day, which by LNG standards is tiny. That's really, really small. But when you're selling the LNG at the kind of levels that we achieve in South Africa by virtue of South Africa's energy scarcity, even 700 tons becomes a very meaningful amount of LNG domestically.
Yeah.
The second thing that's important to consider is that our phase two project from a helium perspective is around 4.2 tons, or about 900,000 standard cubic feet of helium per day. That is somewhere between 6 and 8% of the entire planet's helium supply, which means that it is a very meaningful helium project.
Yeah.
We've already put out guidance notes in terms of what phase two looks like. So when phase two is fully ramped up around 2027, we're talking about it generating an EBITDA somewhere in the region of about $340 million US of EBITDA against a project build of between 1.1 and 1.2 billion dollars. It's a very meaningful return on a project of that size these days.
Well, speaking of ROI, you kind of mentioned it, you teased it, but I want to reconfirm that you're still planning a United States IPO later this year by 2024?
We are indeed. We're going through the motions now of finalizing all of the paperwork. We've got some interested investors lined up. Obviously, we've got the debt already wrapped up, and now it's a case of going through the motions. But yeah, as with any IPO, you need a couple of tailwinds. I think a drop in interest rates might be one of those favorable tailwinds that'll definitely help the cause. But we've got some pretty good momentum behind us, and we've got some really good bits of news coming out. So we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be traded as a ticker on the Nasdaq a little later this year.
Well, look, nothing can be easy. Nothing can be rainbows and butterflies. So let's talk about the power outages that we've seen, unfortunately, in South Africa, especially with the addition of helium that you have with the LNG that we've been talking about. What does the energy landscape look like in South Africa, given the past power outages we've dealt with as well?
So Zunaid, that's a good point. So South Africa has had its fair set of challenges from an energy perspective. Yeah, as little as 15 years ago, the country was generating somewhere in the region of between 40 to 45 gigawatts of installed capacity. And now that generation capacity is a little over 20 gigawatts, which means that there's been a significant curtailment. You've had very large industries having relocated their operations because the power simply wasn't available. Up until only a few months ago, in your own private house, you would be curtailed with electricity. We called it load shedding. You'd be curtailed anywhere from 4 up to 11 hours per day, depending on what the needs on the grid were. So there's this significant underproduction in terms of energy in the country at the moment. But then you exacerbate that with the fact that the country's only supplier of gas domestically, Sasol, who have an operation here in the US at Lake Charles in Louisiana, Sasol is bringing in gas from Mozambique through a pipeline and delivering that gas to Johannesburg. Now, they've openly announced that by middle of 2026, they're going to be shutting off that supply of gas. And that supply of gas alone is more than 5 times our production capacity in phase 2. So you've got an energy crisis with regards to power generation not being where it should, combined with the fact that you've got an inordinate amount of natural gas coming offline. And you really do have what's being hailed in South Africa as the gas cliff. So we, while it's never nice to profit from a negative situation in the country, we do find ourselves again in an ideal position. Hence, the South African government referring to us as what's called in South Africa a SIP, or a strategic integrated project, which is the equivalent in the United States to being declared a project that's critical to US national security. So when it comes to overall planning of the country's energy landscape, we form part of those plans. So it's, we're not the silver bullet. We're not going to solve the whole country's energy problems, but we're one of the pieces that the government is going to utilize towards solving at least completing the larger puzzle. And that, again, it just speaks volumes to where our project fits into the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think having the backing of a government and also see you as an asset is definitely something that speaks volume as well. And with energy, not just what we've been used to in terms of our daily lives, but also with AI starting to take over the world, there is more energy consumption that's going to happen, not just in the US, but all across the world. So, definitely some great things that are happening. And always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. You've got your ticker as REN on the GSE in the US. We'll find out. Can't wait to see what that is, man.
Thank you, Zunaid. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Absolutely. You bet. And of course, viewers, we thank you for watching All Access. That was Stefano Marani, who is the CEO of Renergen. Ticker on the JSE is REN. And of course, they do plan on IPOing here in the US later this year. As always, we do these interviews for you, the viewer at home. So we thank you for watching All Access.